course on guitar chords and how to use them. This video is video 2 of lesson 13 in my course about guitar chords located at guitaru.com, the best free guitar school anywhere. Right now I'm fooling around with something called the 5-position CAGED system, which enables me to take a chord such as G major and play that chord in several different locations all up and down the neck. Which will help you get a lot of great parts out and make up cool songs and cool riffs and just give you more freedom to roam around rather than being landlocked in one chord, G. In my previous video, I discussed what I call the 4 pillars of chord knowledge. The first one of those is, of course, open chords, and being able to play them and analyze them. Not just a few of them, lots of them. For example, it's easy to play open G, but how many players know all the other chords in the open position that do the same job of G major? Hopefully you are one of those players, or you are working on becoming one. The second pillar in my system of chord knowledge is movable bar chords. Being able to play root 6 chords, such as this E major with its root note here on string 6, and raise all the notes in pitch by 1 fret, and knowing that that chord becomes an F major chord. This is still called a root 6 chord because the root note is on string 6. The same system of thinking applies to an A major chord called a root 5 chord. Also, this system of thinking applies to a root 4 chord, like this D major. These 3 chords, E major, A major, and D major, are what I have named the parent chords in my system of sliding guitar chords up and down the neck. I call this system root 6, root 5, and root 4. Well, it's actually not my system, it's just the way it works. The third pillar that holds up your knowledge of chords is what we are here to study. It is called the 5-position thinking, or the CAGED system, as I have just mentioned. In the last video, we examined the CAGED system in the key of C. This CAGED system enables you to play 5 different versions of the same chord all the way up and down the neck. It's called CAGED because it is based on 5 open string chords: C major, A major, G major, E major, and D major, spelling out the word CAGED. The system helps you make sense of a diagram that looks like this, one in which all the notes in the C major chord have been indicated on the neck of the guitar. Once again, it looks daunting and confusing, but with the use of the CAGED system, we can make sense of it in fairly short order. In the key of C, we started out with the basic old C major chord. That's the first chord in the system. In this key, the key of C. The next chord in the 5-position thinking would be here on fret 3, which is the result of transposing an A chord to the key of C. The third chord in this system would be the result of transposing a G chord to the key of C. The next chord in our system would require transposing an E chord to the key of C. This results in a standard C major bar chord on fret 8, often considered a common knowledge chord. And finally, to complete the word CAGED, I would take a D major chord and transpose that all the way up here to the key of C, and that would complete the 5 positions in the key of C. This is the point of understanding you should be at here in lesson 13. So now let's continue with the discussion of how to really own and master this concept, the all-important CAGED system, or the concept of 5-position thinking. The way you do it is simple. You transpose it to every one of 12 keys. That may not be the answer you wanted because it obviously involves a lot of hard work, but that's the answer. As you work with these different keys, you are always thinking of the 5 basic shapes: C, A, G, E, D, and bearing in mind that no matter what key you play in, It's always the same 5 shapes in the same order. It's called CAGED because when we start this process of transposition, when we implement the system with an open C, we spell out the word CAGED. Remember, in neck mechanics and guitar organization, the open position is the king, just as the major scale is the king of music theory. So, if we were to do this system in the key of G, we still think of our word CAGED, but we start out with a G in position 1, because the open position is the king. And now we are going to spell out the word CAGED, but only starting on G. So we start by transposing a G, an A, D, a C, an E. It still spells CAGED, just in the wrong order. So let's examine this in a little greater detail. If I want to play in the 5 positions of a G major chord, I should understand the theory of a G major. To do that, I have to look at a G major scale, and I have to take notes 1, 3, and 5, called the formula, are G, B, and D, called the spelling, and I have to play them together. Sounding those 3 notes together gives me a G chord. G is the first, B is the third, D is the fifth. Now, quite simply, I take those 3 notes, G, B, and D, and find every one of them on the neck of a guitar. It looks like this. First, of course, we start out with all the G root notes and make a special mental note of these notes as they appear on strings 6 and 5 and string 4. This is our basic baseline system of reasoning up until this point, what we have already called the root 6, root 5, and root 4 system. If we are going to apply the CAGED system to this diagram, first we start out in the open position with an open G. We play the G major chord. Not only is this a G major, it is a G type of chord because it has open strings. The next letter in the word CAGED is E, so I am taking an E major chord and I am transposing that to the key of G, and I wind up with the second chord in the CAGED system as it applies to the key of G. This is also called a root 6 G major bar chord, considered a common knowledge chord. The next letter in the word CAGED is D, so therefore I take a D major chord, transpose that to the key of G, and I have arrived at the third of 5 chords in the system of 5 position thinking as it applies to G. Now, as far as the word CAGED is concerned, I have run out of letters. So I go back to the first letter in the word CAGED, and that letter is C. Therefore, I will take a C type of chord in the open position, and I will transpose that C chord to the key of G. Now I have the fourth of 5 chords in this 5 position system of thinking. The fifth chord in the 5 position thinking is an A type. That's the only letter unaccounted for in the word CAGED. So, you guessed it, I will take an open A major chord, transpose that to the key of G, and I will wind up with a root 5 G major bar chord all the way up here on fret 10. This is also considered a common knowledge chord. To complete this exercise, we will take the basic open string G chord, transpose that up 1 octave, and we wind up with G in the 12th position. So in a nutshell, that's 5 position thinking as it applies to the key of G. Of course, this video is an explanation and merely information. If you want to learn, use, and master the 5 position system, you must train and drill by playing these chords up and down the neck. But not only playing them, play them in time with a drum machine or a metronome. By introducing the element of time to your practicing, you are forcing your brain to work a little harder than it wants to. As a serious guitar student, you must train yourself to think and think in great detail and think quickly with regards to this and all exercises. Now, let's talk about variations of these forms and the way I actually practice and play the 5 chords. When we think of an open G major chord, there of course are a number of ways to play G in the first position. Let's start out with good old open G. The first G chord you learn. It's It's a sweet strumming sound. If I want a little bit more of an alarming sound, of a rock and roll sound, I'll fret the E string and the B string on the 3rd fret and construct the rest of the G normally. And that chord really rings quite nicely. To go further in that direction, I could fret those same 2 notes with my 3rd finger, bring my thumb around to grab that low G, deadening the A, and that really rings beautifully. Sometimes just the top 4 notes of that structure is a nice picking chord or special effect chord. And of course there's G over B. Go to the A string, play the B note located on fret 2, and I put my pinky on the D note of the B string. That's like a passing chord. Next is the E type. So I play an E chord, transpose that to G, create a bar on the 3rd fret, and there's my root 6 common knowledge rock and roll bar chord. Can't play rock and roll without it. The power chord is derived from that chord by using the 2 fat strings. The 2 fat strings of that shape give you the power chord. If I played something that looked like an F, F sharp G, also derived from that shape, I can do a ska part or a reggae part. Very common. And there also is a G over B down there. So I put my first finger on that same B note and my G triad. Kind of hard to get to, but worth the effort to learn. It's a beautiful chord. Next in the system is the D chord. So I'm going to play a D like this. Don't normally do it that way, but if I strum it and move it all the way up to the 7th fret, I have G. In the system, the proper way to do that is to stretch your first finger all the way back for that root 4 G, and a lot of people will do that. That's something I hate to do. It's too much of a stretch and it hurts my hand. A good option is to play a G5 power chord. And in my system of buzzing up and down the neck, that's the one I use. Sometimes I'll bring the middle finger over to fret 7 to play G over B. Not one of my favorite things, but I do find a use for it. Those are my options off of the D shape. Next is the C shape. So I'll finger my C chord like this, take that up to the G position, which is located on fret 7, barring fret 7 and constructing a C chord. If I play it that way, I can play G over B again, which is nice and sweet and something I like to do. My way of playing it in my system is to just put my first finger here on the D note, and I use 4 fingers, 4 strings, 4 notes. Again, a lot of people will do that. That's really not something I like to do, but you may like it, so it's a good option. Next is the A type. So I take my A chord, I'm going to finger it like that, move it all the way up there, and reach back for my root 5 G like that, deadening the 2 outside strings with precise finger placement, just resting the tip of the first finger on the fat string, curving the finger just so to deaden that first string. One nice option is to bar that all and play G over D, or a chord with the 5th in the bass. You may recognize that sound from a song called The Wind Cries Mary by Jimi Hendrix. That's the 5th in bass sound. Finally, people who play classical guitar were taught to squeeze all those fingers on the A shape of chord, stretch that finger back, and grab that chord like that, or bar it. That is another thing I absolutely can't stand doing. I don't recommend it and I don't like it. I'm not going to learn it at this stage of the game. If you can do it, cool. The only reason is to get that high E string. But if you do it my way, with a little practice you can still get it. So if you're a classical guitarist, I hope that doesn't hurt your feelings. But you know what? These lessons are free. So just deal with it. Finally, to bring it full circle, we're going to play a G chord, transpose that an octave. The 12th, and I have a transposed open G shape. Very difficult to play. It's not really a go-to rhythm guitar chord, so I don't want to deal with it here. It's more a shape to help you organize and systematize your thinking. Normally I just bar the 12th, put my pinky on the 15th, and construct something that looks like the bottom part of a G chord. And that's my systematic chord that I use in my system of connecting 5 shapes. Some people will play the D, G, and B strings with one finger, and that enables them to have a free finger to play with the third of the chord. And I certainly didn't think of that today. That's a very common rhythm guitar trick. The last thing I'd like to talk about is playing 2 notes on the 15th, 2 notes on the 12th for that same special effect chord we did an octave lower. Okay, so in my system of buzzing up and down the neck, of memorizing the key of G or any key, I start with the open position chord, up to the E type, the D type, the C type, the A type, and finally the G type. And that's the way I do the bossa nova. There you go. This is Karl. Thanks for checking out my stuff here at GuitarU.com. I really appreciate your time. I hope you're enjoying my lessons, because I sure am enjoying making them. So don't forget, learn 5 positions of every major chord. See you next time.